Hello, my name is Kate Stockman, and I am happy that you're here to watch my show called Exploring the Solar Feminine and Her Roles Today. I developed this because I have witnessed the rising of the feminine in the last few years, especially the last 2.5 years. And it's been a real privilege to see the feminine beginning to come into her own. So I am offering this slideshow as a way for you to consider the feminine and how the solar feminine works in your life. I want to start off, first of all, with some basic definitions. The first one is an archetype. The solar feminine is an archetype, and an archetype, according to the dictionary, is the original pattern or model from which all things of the same kind are copied or on which they are based, a model or first form, a prototype. In Jungian psychology, an archetype is a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, image, etc., universally present in individual psyches. For example, no matter what culture you are in, you get an image of when you hear the word mother. And that is a common archetype. It's a major archetype, but that's a common idea or pattern that we all have. Now, the solar feminine, is a combination of feminine and masculine archetypes. And feminine archetypal qualities include passive, yin, reflective, as the moon, dark, small, mother, and goddess. And that is in direct balance with the masculine archetype qualities, which are active as opposed to passive, yang instead of yin, beaming like the sun instead of reflective like the moon, light and dark, large and small, father, mother, and God, goddess. So those are some of the characteristics that we're going to be talking about as we explore the solar feminine. The sacred feminine, or the feminine divine, is an archetype just as the sacred masculine or masculine divine is a complementary archetype. And the solar feminine archetype holds a balance of these two. Talking about additional archetypes, traditionally, the archetype of woman has been portrayed with 3 stages of life: the maiden, the mother, and the crone. The maiden dares to dream how she can change the world. And when the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. Malala is a wonderful example of a solar feminine maiden. And I'm just including some of my favorite images of maidens from all over the world. The maiden typically is full of enthusiasm, curiosity, and excitement, and lots of energy. This young woman on the right with her green gown on made this gown and wore it to her junior senior and went as Artemis, a powerful archetype. On the darkest days when I feel inadequate, unloved, and unworthy, I remember whose daughter I am, and I straighten my crown. And the maiden includes young teens, and we all know that there's a time during a teen's life that sometimes she just wishes she would disappear. And I think this photograph is just a beautiful portrayal of that. The second phase is the mother, who is dedicated to protecting her family and promoting positive change. And here's a mother with her little girl with her fingernails painted, a bejeweled mama who's getting ready to be another mama or a mama again. Our women have been chosen by the Creator to be the portal between the spiritual realm and this physical realm, the only force on earth that is powerful enough to navigate unborn spirits onto this planet. And the great mother, Lady Liberty, and nevertheless, she persisted. The third archetype stage of woman is, or the feminine, is the crone, speaking out and living in ways that show the wisdom of the long view, mentoring and teaching others. Crone has become a term of a negative term in our culture, but it has the same root and origin as crown. So a crone is a member of royalty and is an elder who should be shown much respect. And Jane Goodall is a great one. And Gloria Steinem is another one that's familiar to us all. At my age, in this still hierarchical time, people often ask me if I'm passing the torch. I explain that I'm keeping my torch, thank you very much, and I'm using it to light the torches of others. Because only if each of us has a torch will there be enough light. And Susan B. Anthony, there never will be complete equality until women themselves help to make laws and elect lawmakers. Susan B. Anthony was arrested for voting in the 1872 presidential election. And of course, in the midterms of 2018, the most recent national election, we saw lots of women, solar feminine women, who were elected into national, state, and local offices. Another crone who I admire, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. When the government controls that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a full adult human responsible for her own choices. And never underestimate an old feminist who fears no man. I love her with her cup of tea. And surround yourself with people on the same mission as you. The Peace Pilgrim is a crone that I greatly admire. If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. And Gloria Steinem again, women may be the one group that grows more radical with age. One day, a group of gray-haired women may quietly take over the earth. I believe since we are living longer than ever before, our lifetimes are extended well past our childbearing years, that we are seeing a new archetype within those three stages into a fourth stage evolving. And I call that archetype the warrior queen. This comes after active motherhood and before cronehood. So it's typically maybe from 45 or 50 to 70 or so. She is warrior, fiercely protecting what she most passionately loves, whether it is children, Mother Earth and all her creatures, liberties, lands, or justices. And these are photographs from the early 1900s of a couple of warriors from African tribes. The Vikings had warriors, and I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. And of course, Rosa Parks was a warrior. You must never be fearful about what you are doing if it is right. Harriet Tubman said, I would fight for my liberty so long as my strength lasted. You have seen my descent, now watch my rising. And be thankful we only want equality and not payback. And one of the great queens and warrior queens of our time, Beyonce. She is queen, recognizing that with sovereignty comes responsibility and service to others. This is a portrait of Eleanor of Aquitaine, the most powerful woman of the high Middle Ages, mother to 3 Plantagenet kings, Henry the Young King, Richard the Lionheart, and John. And Beyonce again, as the Sun Queen. In this photograph, this photograph was taken in concert, as you can see, and she was 5 months pregnant with her twins. Marianne Williamson has written, every woman I know wants to be a glorious queen, but that option was hardly on the multiple choice questionnaire we were handed when we were little girls. Rarely did anyone tell us we could choose to be magic. I'm not a princess. I don't need saving. I'm a queen and I've got this shit handled. And she straightened her crown and said, I'm ready, let's roll. And these are some other queens, some warrior queens that are in contemporary history. Inspire like Michelle Obama, challenge like Hillary Clinton, persist like Elizabeth Warren, and speak like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Another archetype, one that I mentioned earlier, is the Artemis archetype. And Jean Shinoda Bolen describes her this way, as Artemis the activist. Artemis, goddess of the hunt with her silver bow and arrows, could hit any target or goal of her own choosing. Sisterhood, feminism, and equal relationships with men are aspects of the Artemis archetype. Artemis was the firstborn twin to her brother Apollo. Focus and persistence comes naturally with this archetype. She roamed the wilderness with her chosen women companions, the nymph divinities of the forests, mountains, and meadows. In the patriarchal power structure of Mount Olympus, any woman or goddess, with the exception of the 3 virgin goddesses, Artemis, Athena, and Hestia, could be violated or overpowered by any god. When the Me Too movement evoked 12 million online responses in the first weeks of what became a movement, Artemis energy was liberated. And the definition of virgin in this sense, it's been turned into something sexual over time, but the definition, original definition of virgin was a woman of her own self, a woman unto herself, who needed nothing else to complete her. This was from the suffrage movement. We will have what we want. And I love the way this woman was just standing there like a warrior saying, read it and weep. This photograph is from Iceland, I think back in the 60s, women of the world unite and fight. A little more graphic nowadays. All through these past few years, we have witnessed women of all ages worldwide standing in their power and speaking their truth with newfound voices. For example, we had our first serious presidential contender in the 2016 presidential election. And the next time someone tries to tell you that Hillary Clinton was a weak candidate, remind them that it took the RNC, WikiLeaks, the FBI, and Russia to narrowly bring her down in an election she won by nearly 3 million votes. The inauguration was followed by the Women's March on Washington on January 21st. And I wanted to include the photograph of this gentleman because not all feminists are feminine. And I want to make that real clear that that's not what this is about. This is just about the solar feminine who has a more balanced energy of masculine and feminine. And this crone here that's holding the sign that says pussy power, boy, she's just tired of all this. And I love the power that she brings to that. Men of quality do not fear equality. And I think this is what mothers do. I march so my daughter doesn't have to deal with this bullshit. So the Women's March on January 21st, 2017 actually was celebrated all over the world. It was celebrated throughout the United States, of course, but there were marches all over the world to honor women. The Me Too movement was founded in 2006 by Tarana Burke as a way to help women who had survived sexual violence, and it caught fire in early 2017. These are some of the men that have either been brought down or brought up on charges because of their sexual predatory natures and behaviors. In August of 2017, there was a solar eclipse that we were able to see where we live in the Western North Carolina mountains. We were able to see a 99% totality. And it was just amazing to watch the moon cover the sun. To me, it was very symbolic. As the moon was creeping in between the earth and the sun, it looked to me, some people said it looks like Pac-Man, but to me, it looked like a pregnant belly crossing the face of the sun. And what I noticed more than anything was once the moon had blocked out the sun, it was cool. I didn't notice as much the darkness as the temperature change. And I thought, wow, the feminine moon is taking on all that solar heat and continuing on her paces. The solar feminine has been on the rise in a lot of ways, as above, so below. Warriors and queens have started entering the mainstream. Wonder Woman, for example, is one of the most powerful and prevalent examples. She is the Amazon warrior who was led by her heart. Black Panther had sacred warriors, male and female, led by their hearts with loyalty and love of their lands. Each of these women had their own gifts and talents and skills, and they used them as they best could to protect their land. There have been other women warriors from throughout history and across cultures portrayed recently in the media, including Wonder Woman, Rey, Mulan, Moana, Princess Leia, Anne of Green Gables, Angela Schuyler, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Okoye. Brene Brown maintains that vulnerability and courage are intimately connected. It takes risk and a whole heart to stand your ground, find your voice, and speak truth to authority. This is a photograph that many of you will remember from the March for Our Lives. This is Emma Gonzalez, who was one of the keynote speakers. She was a student at Douglas High School in Parkland, and she stood there silently for 6 minutes and 17 seconds, which was the amount of time it took for the shooter at Parkland to shoot his victims. It was a very powerful moment. The Fourfold Way is a book by Angeles Arrien, and it's one of those books that literally changed how I perceive and understand things. Arrien was a cultural anthropologist, and in this book, she explored the indigenous tribal characteristics of 4 powerful archetypes: the warrior, the healer, the visionary, and the teacher, who are called the change masters. And these are from her book. When we learn to live these archetypes within ourselves, we will begin to heal ourselves and our fragmented world. She also wrote, spiritualism is the highest form of political consciousness. And as opposed to the current connotation of the role, warrior is actually the peacekeeper of the tribe, using and understanding the 3 universal powers of presence, communication, and position. According to Arrien, the principle that guides the warrior is showing up and choosing to be present. Being present allows us to access the human resources of power, presence, and communication. In indigenous tribes, the warrior is the peacemaker, whose primary objective is to use his or her communication skills, not battle, to resolve conflict. In our society, we express the way of the warrior in our leadership ability. The developed warrior shows honor and respect for all things, employs judicious communication, sets limits and boundaries, is responsible and disciplined, and demonstrates right use of power. In my ponderings, I have realized that the sacred warrior's anger and outrage comes from the threat or injury of what she loves most dearly and protects most fiercely. It comes from her heart, like an arrow or bolt of lightning projecting towards the object of her rage. Anger's purpose is to ignite action, which will focus on powerful change. Unresolved anger kills. Anger turned into action can save. This feminine fire is a primordial elemental force that is powerful beyond our wildest imaginings. It is, in fact, power itself. So, what's next? I've collected some quotes from different folks who are wise women and sages. Vandana Shiva is one of them. We are either going to have a future where women lead the way to make peace with the earth, or we are not going to have a human future at all. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Gandhi said, you may never know what results come from your action, But if you do nothing, there will be no result. And Wangari Maathai, who won a Nobel Prize, in the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to shed our fear and give hope to each other. That time is now. And again, Malala, why another maiden warrior? Why is it that giving guns is so easy, but giving books is so hard? Why is it that making tanks is so easy, but building schools is so difficult? Another Nobel Prize winner. We will meet, all of us women of every land. We will meet in the center, make a circle. We will weave a world web to entangle the powers that bury our children. And the Dalai Lama has said the world will be saved by the Western woman. And I believe that's true because we are the ones who have the resources, the freedoms, and the education to be able to promote positive change without concern to our own safety and well-being. And Glinda, from The Wizard of Oz, you've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. And Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves and many other books. If you have never been called an incorrigible, stubborn, defiant woman, don't worry, there's still time. This is a beautiful photograph of one of two things happening, and I'll let you decide whether or not the tide is showing her and exposing this golden goddess, or is the tide covering her up? So what now? What role do I play? I started this journey by thinking about some of my friends who are very politically active, and they show up at marches, at vigils, and at demonstrations. And I found, after the election of 2016, and I found that I was comparing myself with these other women who I greatly admired, and I felt compelled to do what they were doing. And yet that's not who I am. That's not my gift, not anymore. And so it made me start thinking about what are my gifts that I can offer that will help promote positive change. And so I have realized that calling the circle and promoting conversation and dialogue is one of my gifts, which is why I created this presentation. What are your gifts? How can you promote positive change, not only in your life, but in the community around you? Sometimes it's just being a good neighbor. Sometimes it's a teacher. Whether it's a formal teacher in an educational institution, or a teacher, a mother as a teacher, or other women as teachers of other women. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. Thank you for your interest and your time, and thank you for all you do to promote positive change in our community.